Good morning. I want to thank everybody who joins us. My name is Halyna and Ukraine Media Center Current Forum starts its operation today. It's been 9 years of the war, and today is day 373 of the full-scale invasion of a Russian aggressor in our homeland. And I traditionally want to thank the representatives of all the mass media who tell the world the truth about our fight for freedom. Our brief schedule of events for today is as follows. At 13:30, joining us will be Taras Savchenko, acting head of Sumy Regional Military Administration, and we will be talking about the situation in Sumy region. And at 1400, joining us online will be Andrei Vertrenko, the first Deputy Minister of Education and Science of Ukraine, and we will talk about the professional higher education under martial law. And right now we will be talking about the action of solidarity with Ukraine around the globe on the anniversary of Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. And I want to invite our speaker today is Hryhorenko, Deputy Minister of Culture and Information Policy of Ukraine. Ms. Halyna, please let us know how all those things happened. Good morning. As you mentioned correctly, there was a lot of actions all around the globe. Last week was rich in visits of diplomats and art actors to Ukraine. This is why the solidarity actions are important not only abroad but inside Ukraine too. I'm reminding you, visiting Ukraine was Greg Hofstetter, the Swiss media artist who illuminated the buildings in Kyiv and Odessa, drawing attention of world community to the peace, to the necessity of peace of Ukraine. There was a concert in Lviv Opera, the concert of Victoria Wilson, the Canadian artist. The concert was aired, broadcasted on our radio culture, and there was a visit of Minister of Culture of France, her first visit to Ukraine, and we showed her our museums, our empty museums from where we evacuated the works of art. We were talking about the importance of maintenance of culture ties between Ukraine and France and support of Ukrainians who currently stay in France. And I want to tell more in detail what's going on abroad, because in the culture front there are a lot of things happening that draw attention of the people around the globe to the importance of support and non-removal of Ukraine matter, Ukraine issue from the agenda, from the global agenda. The cultural events are non-diplomatic events, but they are the force through which we can communicate to the world, proving our right to our culture, our language, our future, and that we should be supported by all world in this unfair war. And the victory of Ukraine and its renewal of its borders as of 1991, and the cultural events they contribute to the increase of such attention. On the 20th of February, there was an opening of exhibition, the immersive exhibition based on the works of Taras Shevchenko. They were supported by the Embassy of Canada in France, also in the equivalent of Polytechnic University. There was an immersive exhibition opened which showed the destruction of cultural and critical and residential infrastructure in Ukraine using the VR goggles, VR devices. The people could see the horrors of war. The Europeans could see the horrors of war in Ukraine. This is something that draws the attention to us and keeps us on the agenda. That exhibition is traveling. It was happening yesterday in Warsaw. It was also on the 27th February in Berlin. They will be in Brussels, and they were already in Washington, D.C. During one day in Berlin, that exhibition was visited by more than 1,000 visitors. Some of them could not help but breaking in tears. They were saying that it's absolutely important experience because you seem to be immersing really in this exhibition, and you see it from the height of the altitude of the drone flying, or with the eyes of a pedestrian walking along the street. And those are the horrors of the world we're living in. On the 21st of February there was a concert in Prague with the participation of Kyiv Symphony Orchestra, who is touring around Europe, and they performed the military Requiem Britannia. It's the work that was written after World War II, and they performed it in support of the peace process in Ukraine. And the speech of Martin Baxter drew the attention of the culture actors in Ukraine, because the majority of them currently stay in Ukraine and continue to create their works of art here in Ukraine. In Warsaw there was a concert in Warsaw National Opera. The Requiem by Verdi was performed there too. It was with the participation of our Kharkiv Youth Orchestra and solo artists from Ukraine. That concert was to signify the solidarity and cooperation with Ukrainian artists. And talking about the classical music, I will continue with the concert of Metropolitan Opera that was going on the 24th of February in the night. Requiem by Mozart was performed there with the participation of Ukrainian musicians, and since the beginning of the full-scale invasion, they support Ukraine extensively, and Metropolitan Opera supports the program for training of Ukrainian artists, Ukrainian musicians, and 4 of our young professionals who start their career. They started working with Metropolitan Opera, they started their training with Metropolitan Opera, and they're coming back shortly and will use that experience working in Ukrainian art sphere. And we are waiting for the selection, but we know that Metropolitan Opera wants to order an opera from a Ukrainian musician that will be played there. The recording of that concert was broadcasted on the 1st of March for Ukrainian listeners on the radio called the Culture Radio, and everybody may hear the record online. There was a concert in the city of Rzeszów, which was awarded the name of a savior city or rescuer city. There was a concert of popular music, Ukrainian pop music there. We know that there is the largest number of internally displaced persons or Ukrainian refugees in Poland currently, and we to appreciate the hospitality of Poland, since we all understand that this hospitality may be exhausted, that people get tired of, they may be tired of guests, but still our citizens need to have that refuge when they are under threat, staying at home. Also, there was a concert in Riga, in the arena of Riga Circus, which was broadcasted in Latvian television. Also, through popular music and television, we can cover a lot more broad territories rather than with the concerts of classical music. And all these cultures of all these actions of solidarity, cultural solidarity, are invaluable to us. Also, the TV channel Artem from the 21st February broadcasted the record of Alexander Rodin based on the Taras Shevchenko poem Katerina. That was the first premiere during the war, the first big opera premiere, a work written by a modern Ukrainian musician based on the work of Ukrainian poet, and it was impressive to our foreign colleagues. And even under bombs, under the rockets, the Odessa Opera continues working and creating such wonderful works of art. I also have to mention that in Berlin on the 24th of February there was a festival, the Art and Weapon, and it was to some extent popular festival. On the other hand, chamber music festival. It included theatrical performances. The festival represented the works of Ukrainian designers, Ukrainian pop musicians, and there was a food court with Ukrainian food. The event was attended by thousands of denizens of Berlin who were expressing their support to Ukraine. Also on the 28th of April there was an event in the Cafe Moscow, a famous building in the center of Berlin. That building belongs to the Soviet era in Berlin, and since it's the historical monument, it cannot be remained due to the law which regulates the cultural heritage in German, but it was symbolically renamed to Kyiv just for one night, correctly performed with proper transliterations with Y. It was supported by the foundation of Konrad Adenauer, and there were public discussions of German and public politicians, academicians, and scientists and artists going on there. The dialogues of such actors, and Oksana Zabushko presented her new book, The Longest Travel, which to some extent explains why this war is going on and how it's going on, and it explains that our fight is not going on for 9 years but way longer. So during those events the narratives were very, very different, because German society is not homogeneous in their support in Ukraine, so we know how important it is to continue sending our messages, to continue expressing our narratives, to focus the attention on Ukraine, because we hear a lot that not all the Russians are so bad, that it's not all of them who support Putin. And I'm happy that our politicians, and me too, the only negotiations we can agree on is the negotiations on reparations and capitulation of Russia, and this is the common thought for all the diplomats and politicians and cultural actors for Ukraine. It's their joint opinion. We have to continue working with decolonization optics, because Russian Empire for a long time invested significant funds to make sure that Ukraine, the opinion on Ukraine and other former republics of USSR was created only through the optics of Moscow, and to change this optic, to withdraw from that opinion of metropoly and to give us the voice so we could tell about our dreams, our future, our own history, our own culture. It's very important, and not to bring us together in the same platforms, same cultural platforms. It's impossible, because reconciliation through culture cannot do everything. We have to make sure Ukrainians can stand for their opinion of their view of the future and on our culture. The last news from London say that Ukraine was added to the top 20 most influential countries of the world, and we understand that the significant role is being played by culture component. So how do we preserve those positions, and what are the plans to reinforce our cultural component in the international field? Well, this rating reflects that not only culture but diplomacy and information policy, they are the soft power that helps us to stand for our stance without weapons, to have our voice in international organizations, to make sure we are heard to, and decolonization approach in any politics spheres is extremely important, because most of the narratives that were sounding from Ukraine were perceived through the optics of former empire, which we were part of. And it's important to do the same in the cultural sphere, because the soft approaches, maybe through these soft approaches we can explain what's going on here. And there is a huge work to be done in terms of a decolonization policy, and it's happening with the support of Ukrainian Institute, which is responsible for the cultural diplomacy. And I appreciate the efforts of our colleagues, because in view of the events that were going on in Paris last week, they had a very extensive program. It was called Ukrainian Spring, but in fact it was going on from the last autumn until now, and it was closed with the lectures of Vakhtang Kibuladze, the philosopher, and Alexandra Matvichuk, who were reading lectures in the University of Sorbonne about what Ukraine is. And through academic communities, we have to continue working with the international audience. It's a systemic wars that will help us change the view of Ukraine and to keep our position in this rating of soft power. Dear colleagues, your questions, Svetlana Tkachuk, Ukrinform, Ms. Halyna, I have a couple of questions to you. My first question is about the international support of Ukraine thanks to the art actions. From what we've heard, those things are happening in Europe mostly. And is there any strategy to spread them to other regions like Asia or Africa? I'm not talking obviously about North Korea, but if it's South Korea, so why not? And do you think that the strength of Ukrainian art may break those narratives that are rooted there? For example, in Africa. Thank you for your question. This is really one of the strategic directions of work of cultural diplomacy, because so-called global south and the countries of Latin America and Asia, there is very little presence of Ukraine and Ukrainian culture. We did not invest funds in that because any culture event requires financial support, and it's extremely important now. Now those strategic priorities are set, and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs works with that, and we work with the partners too. We meet with the cultural actors from different countries, and it's a long wait, it's expensive, but we take efforts to be present there with the Ukrainian culture, for example with documentaries or online, something that is easier to us. If you've probably heard about the documentary Freedom on Fire by Yevhen Fanievsky and Henri Bernard-Lévy, which was premiered on the 26th of February in the cinema of Zholten. So with those documentaries, it would be probably easier to communicate with those countries which are difficult to reach by our artists. There are also exhibitions and live discussions. This is what we're working on, because really those are the priority countries, because Russian narratives prevail there, and all those countries are parts of international organizations, and we have to conquer their hearts and minds. And is there any monitoring which identifies the attitude to Ukrainian culture among the citizens of those regions. Well, it's probably part of the responsibility of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, but there was a study on the change of view of Ukraine in international media, and the Ministry of Culture's responsibility is preservation of culture and provision of cultural services to Ukrainian citizens, including those temporarily displaced abroad, and public diplomacy is responsibility of Ministry of Foreign Affairs, but I know for sure there are studies and researches going on. The Ukrainian Institute had a few waves of such researches and studies of attitude to Ukraine in Japan, Turkey, and countries of Europe. All the results of such studies are in their websites. This kind of work is going on and it's in progress. Thank you for your answer. Another question is about Ukrainians who left for abroad, because there is a lot of cultural and art actors currently staying there. Does the state plan to gather some equivalent of, say, of choir? Of course, it's a people who may gather and gather abroad and translate some a piece of Ukrainian culture there. Well, it's probably difficult to say that they may be united, because they are the people of different cultural professions, and joining them, gathering them requires administrative and financial resources. We need venues where they could perform, but I trust more in the bottom initiatives, and I know that our artists are, I know, for example, that there are initiatives by Ukrainian musicians, for example, who stay in Berlin since 24th of February. They create their programs, they tour with Ukrainian music, and there are individual artists such as writers, for example, or painters. They may work alone, and in such countries as Austria and France, those countries provided the residence for artists who may stay there for 2 to 3 months. They are provided with resources and they may present some result, and I trust in I trust the bottom initiatives. Thank you very much for joining us. Halyna Hryhorenko, Deputy Minister of Culture and Information Policies. Thank you for joining our broadcast. Dear colleagues, I'm reminding you our next briefing is at 13:30. We will be talking about the situation in Sumshina, so bear with us. Trust in armed forces and glory to Ukraine.